I'm happy to see a lot of new faces here and then some returning faces. Thank you all for joining in. If you are new, I am the manager of organizational development for our sector support team here at United Way of Central Indiana. And kind of diving into a really important topic today, as a lot of you know, despite the significant efforts that we put towards it, we're still seeing just vast disparities in graduation rates among high school students in Central Indiana and beyond. So today we're bringing together a truly fantastic group of experts to dive into these challenges and, kind of share strategies and thought partner to help remove these barriers and, of course, discuss ways to support our students and our youth. So today we're going to be joined by slide. And then slides aren't working. Here we go. By Marie Wright of Employ Indy, Kelly Marshall of the Mind Trust, Darcy Hawkshurst of Indy Reads, and Devin Hyber of Rooted School Indy. Again, as you can see, just a truly fantastic group of experts with tons of experience and insights to share with you all. So just let's go ahead and dive right in. We don't have much time. First and foremost, Kelly, Marie, Darcy, Devin, thank you guys for being here. I want to get us started off by just explaining our role, our organization, and then kind of the lens and perspective that you see educational equity from with the work that you're doing before we kind of dive into the question. So that way we can give our crowd a little bit of, briefing on the background that you're coming from. So Kelly, I'll start with you.
Okay, good morning. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I think, the first response I would offer to that is that that is literally what the Mind Trust in our organization prides itself on, right? It's providing opportunities for parents to have more choice. And what we're seeing is that that allows them to make decisions that are best for their children. And we think that from our organization's perspective, equity is allowing that access and opportunity. And so all of our work is grounded in those two areas, access and opportunity.
Oh boy, I love that. Marie, we'll kind of transition to you now. If you could just, give us a little bit of your role and what lens you see educational equity from as well.
Good morning, everyone. As a part of Employee Indy, the Workforce Development Board of Marion County, part of our strategic plan is part of the career connected learning piece, and that is actually how we're bridging the gaps in educational equity. We have a talent bound continuum where we're providing opportunities to expose students, engage students, and also provide them with opportunities to get that professional work experience that would actually help bridge that education equity to also that professional equity.
Love that. Okay. And Darcy, we'll transition to you.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having us here. An honor and a privilege to represent Indy Reads today and to just share a little bit. I think our perspective is that though I work with an amazing, hardworking team who loves their work, we would love more if we weren't needed, right? So we're on the adult education end where unfortunately we're for 413 students last year. And we're just one tiny band of folks in the realm of adult education where we know we're actually seeing people for whom traditional mainstream K through 12 systems did not necessarily work. And so we tend to look at it through the lens of understanding that a lot of what happens in our traditional learning environments, we have to look, I think, a little bit deeper at the root cause. We have to understand and recognize that those systems, if you will, weren't necessarily created or designed with the intention to liberate, right? The intention there was to control. And I think if we're not actually looking at the root cause and saying, for example, what we do in adult education, we're catching folks who fell through those cracks, who decided to step step outside of oppressive systems that didn't meet their needs. I think we tend to confuse in our modern society, we tend to confuse learning, reading specifically, learning in general. We look at those as academic subjects. And what they really are neurological functions. And so we've kind of conflated education and systems of education with true learning. And what does it take for a brain to be able to take in information, decode abstract symbols and make meaning of them and to use that skill as a survival skill in the modern world. So that's our lens, and we're delighted to be here to help share that perspective and see what we can do to partner to make sure that, honestly, we would love to work our way out of a job. We would love it if there was not a need for adult education. Yeah. So that's what we're here to do. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to have you, Darcy. And then Devin, we'll round it out with you if you could share a little bit about your background and what Rooted School Indy, what perspective and lens they see educational equity from as well.
Yeah, good morning. I'm definitely privileged to be here representing Rooted Indy this morning. As the Chief Academic Officer, I'm all things curriculum and instruction, but what's fun about that, though, is our innovative approach, right? So Rooted Indy is really grounded in the mission of personal pathways to financial freedom, really closing the wealth gap for our students and, within this community, right? So access and equity comes from exposure, right? And being able to expose our students to everything from all possible vantage points, right? So it's not just, are we providing rigor in the classroom? Are we, making sure they have everything they need to food, clothes, whatever, right? All of those are super important, vital. But what we also need to do is recognize that they need to see, right? They need to see the opportunities that are available to them, things that they can do. And we're excited to be able to offer them this, blended real world experience and everything that they could possibly do and want to do and give them the tools and the capacity to do so.
And Devin, I'm happy that you mentioned the word exposure because that kind of leads into my next question. As you mentioned, Rooted School Indy focuses on blending real world experience with education. So how does this approach contribute to addressing educational inequity in high school specifically?
Yeah, I think that when we can show our students that there are options out there, right? Uh, Certainly, college is what is one of them. But when we can give them build on their interest, right? Build an understanding of our students, their interests, what's possible inside and outside of their community. So we're forming partnerships, right? The Mind Trust is such a great partner of ours and has been outstanding in leading the charge here and helping us realize there's so many partners, there's so many organizations. I've been affiliated with Indy Reads, and I was so privileged to be affiliated with them as well. But all of these organizations that are out there now, Explorador, Struggle University, these great organizations that are there to help our students. I think when people think access and inequity, right, it's not just the physical, right? Are we holistically looking at how we can help these students from all different lenses, social, emotionally, behaviorally? What can we do to continue to open these doors for them to realize that this cycle that they may be in can certainly be stopped and move in a different direction, depending on what your interests are, and that's where the innovation comes through, and how we can give our students different pathways to success.
Absolutely. And speaking to just like innovation within education and leading to success, Marie, I want to kind of bounce to you here. How does Employ Indy's workforce development programming intersect with the efforts to improve educational equity, particularly for high school students facing socioeconomic challenges?
We partner with all of the Marion County high schools in various different aspects, where we have the three different components that we focus on. Where I said we expose students, we're exposing them to various different careers and opportunities. We have employer partners that come and meet with them. We engage with them by having various different opportunities, such as like job sparks that just happened this week, or if it's just more or less bringing that business partner to them to actually expose and engage them on exactly what is available to them so they can see it, so they know how to be it. And then eventually when we have the experiences where we have various opportunities such as Jobs for America's graduates, and then also that leads to the various topics of our line of the Modern Apprenticeship Program, which I happen to be the leader of that program, where we're providing students with the opportunity to gain professional work experience in those various different pathways that Devin was just speaking about.
Absolutely. And obviously we can't discuss innovation in education without the Mind Trust coming into this conversation at all. So, Kelly, the Mind Trust, it focuses on education innovation. Um, how do you incorporate innovative practices into these efforts to address educational inequity? And I know there's a wide range of it, but can you just give us a little bit of, what results have you seen with that?
Well, we're continuing to see growing results. I think, first of all, in terms of the innovation, the innovative practices that we get to engage in are just what Devin and Marie spoke about. We have the opportunity to position partners just like them, the school, with the additional resources. And because we prioritize the charter and innovation sector, we're prioritizing environments in which leaders have the autonomy to move nimbly and to offer access and opportunity in different ways that aren't, necessarily constrained by that some schools and districts find in principals find in larger districts. So again, just really want to shout out our schools and our education partners here on the team. Here on this call. In terms of the outcomes, what we're seeing right now is in Center Township, more than 59% of students are attending a charter and innovation school. And when we drill down and look at the outcomes of those specific subgroups, specifically our Black and Hispanic students, right now they're outperforming on statewide assessments. They're outperforming the state averages. And so we look at that data and we're saying, okay, if we're putting choice in the hands of the parents and we're allowing our schools to move autonomously and we're positioning schools with the resource partners out there, it's becoming just like the perfect mix that allows our students to flourish. And when we look at that high school level, especially with those proposed changes that are coming, inevitably to our graduation requirements, we want to make sure that our students and our families are aware of those changes. So we sit in a space where we can get that information out in enough time for parents and students to make these educated decisions about their future.
Mm-hmm. Well, first off, round of applause for the results and outcomes that you're seeing. That's amazing, and that's exactly the reason why we are here today. We want to gather and we want to brainstorm and thought partner together to see what we can come up with and what strategies we can come up with together so that we can break down these barriers. So that was a really great fun fact to share, and I'm happy to hear that. Darcy, I want to kind of bring you into this. I know literacy is just such a critical component of academic success. So, how does Indy Reads address literacy gaps among high school students, and what impact has your organization and have your programs had?
Thank you for that question. I love what I'm hearing in the room today too. So, right, so this idea of literacy is if it's something that you either have or don't have, right? There's a spectrum of literacy. And one of the things that's really unique about Indy Reads in the world of adult education, specifically in Indianapolis, is that we offer pathways, literally pathways to literacy. So we address, for example, to get into an adult education program, you have to take a test. And that itself, that very first step, we see lots of folks that's a barrier for a lot of folks. If you don't read well enough or quickly enough or have enough comfort with the technology that test is administered through, then that right there is a barrier for you to even get into class. So what we do when we see a gap like that, we say, let's offer, if literacy is a spectrum, all the way from being able to recognize that squiggle shapes have meaning and sound, all the way up to the spectrum of being able to use that skill to answer questions, to navigate the world, we offer the whole spectrum. So we have our unique foundations to literacy class, and that is for the most basic learner. We have something similar in our ELL branch, right? So Indy Reads does adult basic education. We also help the growing number of people who are coming to us to ask for improving their English proficiency. We offer something very similar for those who have less than like a sixth grade education in their home country. We offer pathways to literacy as well. And so that's just a way to say, before we just kind of throw you on the merry-go-round, right? Like it's spinning so quickly. There's so much happening. Literacy sounds like a simple word, and there's so much to unravel there, both in terms of what the brain is doing to interpret all of this, all the way to the ways that we use it, the different contexts that we use it, and how complicated it can be to navigate those systems. So we just slow the merry-go-round down as much as we can, and we say, let's help you even get on. Let's get on right here. And one of the reasons, so the impact that we see, actually that foundations class started with just a handful of folks, and we have the highest enrollment that we've ever had before. We're in the double digits now, people on a waiting list. And so we're delighted to be able to offer people not just the opportunity to improve their reading, but to really start at those most beginning levels and to do it without shame, right? Because here's what I'm hearing from the group. One of the reasons that our programs are succeeding, there's a theme here, and that is that we're recognizing, well, it has to be student-centered, and innovative means let's not be system-centered, let's be student-centered, and let's make it interest-led. Every single person that's talking about a program succeeding has that as a component. It's interest-led, it's interest-based, so that is one of the hallmarks of our program as well. And when we partner, and we seek to make sure that value and those principles are definitely a part of any learning space that we get involved in, because that is what helps people to succeed, is when they see themselves in the curriculum and they see their needs as central to what they're going to be focusing on and asked to do. So I think that's a part of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Darcy. And I'm happy that you kind of mentioned this barrier of overcoming an anti-innovative mindset. Excuse me. I could sit and bounce between all of you this entire time, but I want to bring you all into the conversation here collectively. Kelly, I'll begin with you. What do you see as one of the most primary barriers to educational equity in Central Indiana? And I know that's a lofty question, so hopefully take a few moments to process here. But yeah, what do you see as the primary barrier to educational equity in Central Indiana specifically? And how can various stakeholders work together to overcome them, whether it's something like a call or programming or like anything? How can we do our best to work together and collaborate to overcome it based on what you believe the primary barrier is?
Okay, so I'll speak from my perspective. First and foremost, I'm an educator, and I found the greatest success when I've had great success in both traditional and charter, but I found the greatest success when I had the autonomy to move in a manner that meets the needs of my students. Well, in doing so, though, in that charter and innovation space, I was always having to balance what I could offer my students with my facilities and transportation costs, right? We have a legislative session coming up, and I'm hopeful that there will be a conversation about one, equitable funding across all school sectors, and two, an opportunity to discuss some type of solution to these barriers to transportation. We've got the red line. I'm watching students from Heron get off those buses and go to the school of their choice. And Heron, you can see their outcomes. Not all students have that opportunity. And so for me, the barriers are in equitable funding across the sector so that every child deserves the same amount of access and funding so that their education can, align with their needs. And the second is the opportunity to get to those institutions. So again, selfishly as a school leader, I need my kids to safely be able to get to the school that is best for them. So we could also talk about, we prioritize students that live in Center Township. You hear a lot of people talking about food deserts. We know that, I know, Darcy, you would say the brain has got to be fed, right? Well, if our students, only healthy meal are the ones that they get at school, then there's no access to fresh foods when they get, on their way home. So you're hitting a soft spot with me there, because I could say equitable funding, transportation, and access to quality, nourishing foods and vegetables in some of our most impoverished environments.
Thank you, Kelly, for sharing. Devin, I'll transition to you. I know that you're at Rooted School Indy primarily still within a school on a daily basis, serving as the chief academic officer. So would love to hear what you believe the primary barriers are to educational equity in Central Indiana.
Yeah, I think, I am I interact with every single student every single day that's in this building. It's important to me to form relationships with all of these kids because I think that's how you um, get a clear picture of what those barriers are. I think that overarching, what we have is, a system that's sort of failing overall in our community, right? And providing opportunities for our kids to, as Kelly indicated, places to go, right? What is happening outside of our school, outside of the classroom, things that we can and cannot control, right? So what can we control and what can't we control? And I think that that's ultimately from a 30,000-foot view, right? Um, we have to figure out, that's a big barrier, right? And so inside the school, we can fix those things, right? We can, if it's something that's preventing them in the classroom from learning or whatever it is, right? I'm going to do whatever I can to fix it, right? But outside of the school, what can we do, as you said earlier, collaboratively to really fight this fight of um, any barriers that are existing? And I think a lot of it is family dynamics. A lot of it is social emotional um, capacities, right? These students are lacking, for a better term, in competencies to be able to cope, to be able to be self-aware, to have empathy for others. I think that that is, if I had to identify one thing, I would love to build that capacity in our students because I think that they deal with a lot of these things, but they don't have the skills to be able to combat them on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And Darcy, I want to allow you some space to weigh in here as well. And then Marie, I'll transition to you before we move on to our next question. Just some of the primary barriers you see in educational equity here in Central Indiana.
Yeah, I mean, I resonate with everything that's been said already. I really want to pick up this thread from Devin. What we're talking about in terms of social and emotional development, how it impacts learning and memory, which are that's the underpinnings, right, of literacy and becoming able to read, write, remember, communicate, have numeracy skills, use them to, again, for survival in the modern world. When you kind of dig down deeper into that, what we find is a root cause, and this is also a root cause. We were having conversations over at Eskenazi not that long ago, and it talking about quality of life and what impacts longevity. And it's, if you keep going all the way down at the root, what you find really is a very common root, and that root is stress. And that's not some kind of abstract word that I'm just throwing around. Like, every human being experiences stress in one form or another, but we're really understanding how our, when you end up in a situation of too much stress for too long, and we're looking at all these factors, right? We're looking at the stress of not having adequate food. We're looking at the stress of not having permanent or safe shelter. We're looking at the stress of not having family support, family stability. We're looking at the stress of potential within or outside our home, in our environment somewhere. And all of those stresses add up to a really poor state of health in the brain. And then the brain cannot, if you are so focused on being able to manage that stress, you don't have the bandwidth for the other things that we're throwing at people in terms of what we think learning should be and what should happen in a classroom and what should happen with that classroom material when you take it home. So the other thing I want people to remember about stress is that it's a chemical thing, and stress hormones will tear apart your neuronal connections. Like, you literally do not, when we say I'm stressed out or I'm burned out, when someone is in a state of grief or shock, when someone has experienced trauma, you're talking about literally the brain cannot create new pathways for learning. And so I think if we're going to look at, barriers, and we're going to look at root cause, we have to find ways to address those stressors that are at the root of what's holding folks back from being able to reach their full potential. Because the truth is, every human being has that incredible full potential if we can get the environment right. So
absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, Darcy. And Marie, I would love for you to round us out just with the primary barriers you see from your lens to educational equity here in Central Indiana.
I agree with all the panelists so far, but I wanted just to hit on a few things in regards to basically the workforce development space. In
Mhm.
regards to transportation, Marion County being one of the biggest cities in India, the biggest city in Indiana, and we have one of the worst transportation systems that, available for our students to be able to participate in the work-based learning opportunities. It would take on an average for a student to leave. So one of the schools maybe Kelly works with, it takes them on an average of 2 hours to get to a work-based learning opportunity. And that is one of the major barriers because they do not have the opportunity to possibly have a car to get them from point A to point B. So how would they have an effective professional work experience if they cannot get there utilizing the public transportation that's made available? Then also funding, as with our school partners that we work with, we notice that school funding is vastly different amongst every school, from big to small, to charter to public to private. So we also say those are the major barriers that we always consistently see, that um, offerings and opportunities. As we continue to talk about pathways, as Kelly spoke, that she's had great success in our traditional schools, such as North Central or Pike or things of that nature. Those schools have more opportunities and offerings than those students that would go attend the Rooted or Victory College Prep or Charles Tinley. So the opportunities are vastly different across the city. So that provides continuous inequity in our educational landscape. And then I also will lastly say the familiar support to help guide informed decisions. We have parents who are unaware of what is available to them and various different opportunities, because sometimes the messaging may not be clear enough to them to meet them where they are, and they're not informed enough to be able to make that informed decision that would be best for their child or even them as an adult. So those are the 5 things that I would like to say are the continuous cause of inequity in our educational landscape in Indianapolis.
Wow, very informative. Each panelist, really appreciate you all sharing. And a common theme that I heard here are just some of the statistics around stress and transportation. So, can you give us a little bit of insight into what role data plays in identifying these barriers and addressing educational disparities, any resources that should be taken advantage of, and how they can effectively be used to help drive the change that we want to see? So, Devin, I'll begin with you if you could speak to that a little bit.
You picked the right person. Data's my middle name. No, I love it. So yeah, I think uh, from overarching data, we're looking to identify trends, right? So what we're looking at is we're looking at not just grades, achievement, but attendance. We're looking at how we can put all these different components together to see if there are common phenomena, right? Are we seeing that maybe in online courses, students are not doing well, which is something that we're battling right now? And then what are we doing? Like, what are the steps that we're taking to build students up to success and things like that? And then I would say outside of that, in our multi-tiered systems of support, right, MTSS process, we're putting in, what are the interventions that are successful from a behavior or a social emotional standpoint that may or may not be contributing to success in academics. So the data points that are really important are anything that we can get our hands on is going to be relevant, right? A student that's coming in, behavior records, any sort of family records, state scores, things like that. Sometimes this could be like really difficult to get all these things. I think that access to as many data points as possible is vital. And speaking to the collaboration, I think it's important that we all recognize how important it is to know as much as we can about each student that comes into our building, and then being able to analyze this data in a way that's meaningful and is also, accessible to families, to teachers, and even to students. Students need to have some academic ownership over, what they're doing in the classroom, and do they know what that looks like, right? So I think the idea of collective responsibility in sharing our data and how that can help move students and put things into place for them that help them recognize their strengths and also their weaknesses, and develop this growth mindset that we can all do better in whatever we do, right? We're all lifelong learners. And in doing so, we need to see what it looks like, for us to be successful and for us to also know what we need and identify that through different data points.
Absolutely. We're all lifelong learners. I love that. Darcy, I'll transition to you here. If you could just bring us into a bit what role you believe data plays in identifying and addressing these educational disparities that can be used to help drive the change.
Yeah, I love this question. I'll admit I have a mixed relationship with data. I think one of the reasons is that for so long we've seen data that doesn't shift that much, that keeps pointing in the same direction, and it has been so hard to harness enough willingness to move some of the social structures in the direction of addressing it. But, we don't see anything terribly surprising in the data that we collect at Indy Reads. We know that more than 80%, closer to 90% of our folks who seek out assistance with being able to read more proficiently, being able to use the English language more proficiently, they come from the margins, right? These are predominantly people of color. They're predominantly women. They have the responsibility of caring for children. They are, under the poverty level. They're, they have lack of access to all the things that we're talking about here today that we all know are prerequisites or requirements for being able to learn and read and remember and succeed academically. So those, and we collect that data, and yes, we look at all of that through the lens of trying to help us, yes, understand maybe who we need to partner with to address some of those issues, to help folks, get into our learning spaces. It helps us to inform what programs to offer, where to offer them, how to offer them. For example, we look at how to make sure that mothers who are caring for small babies at home during the day when they're alone, don't have to choose between my class and my child's needs, right? So we make sure our instructors will tell people where to find your mute, how to turn your camera off if you need to nurse a child or take care of. So we don't want people to have to choose either or. I think the other thing for me around data, and this is a real growth opportunity for us at Indy Reads in this moment, is capturing the more qualitative data that tell us the stories, who these human beings are, what they want, where they come from, where they want to go. Because if we're not listening to those voices, then we're not truly being student-centered. We need to know. I mean, I might have all the greatest ideas in the world for how to put together a lesson and a class and a scope and a sequence, but if it doesn't meet somebody where they are and take them to where they want to be, what's the point of that? So we're looking at gathering data directly from our students. We do it within the classroom. We're looking at ways to make sure that we're tracking it so that, yes, we can see the themes and mine it for these overarching factors that we need to keep our eye on. But ultimately, it needs to really come from the learners themselves, and that's a strong value of ours. So I can talk about that all day, but I won't. I'll yield to the next to the next panelist. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Marie, would love to hear just what role you believe data plays in, effectively driving the change.
I would just say prior to the pandemic, it was projected that 2% of the jobs in Central Indiana will require a post-secondary education or greater, while only 42% of those even had those required credentials. So I would say then in 2020, we had over 12.3 of Marion County residents who were left unemployed with no post-secondary education or training. So I would say the pandemic has also taught us a lot of where we are and actually just reevaluating how it's important to have a dual system of education and career connected learning to ensure like quality pathways are available to prepare our students for transitioning if they choose to transition to post-secondary and or to jobs of the future. And this also benefits both our current adults or those who are soon to be adults. And as we see with our employers now, our employers are dealing with and I don't know the statistic off the top of my head this morning, but it's more or less a great flight in individuals who are transitioning out of their roles. As we continue to see, there is a high need for educators, even in the airline industry, there is going to be a great flight in retirement, and there's no individual there's no workforce to actually prepare to take over those individuals who are retiring from the airline industry. So what would that mean? We will not have individuals who will be able to, who will not have the credentials or the education to be prepared to put us on our next Southwest flight across the country.
And as we know, that's been somewhat of a struggle recently. But Kelly, want to finish us off? Would love for you to round us out, just speaking to what role you believe data plays in, effectively driving the change here.
Absolutely. I think what I always say is that data is the entry point to any conversation. No matter what your beliefs, what side you're on, data is what it is, right? And so data plays a crucial role in getting everyone to understand where we are, the reality of where we are. When we think about, from my perspective, the data points that, we pay most attention to are definitely those relative to the funding. I encourage every listener on this call, I encourage all of our panelists, when we're talking or when you're seeing the public facing data relative to our students, go behind the curtain and break it down into the specific subgroups. You can't talk about equity if we're not speaking to specific subgroups and the outcomes of each of those subgroups. So we'll often see statewide assessment data, but do we see it broken down by free and reduced lunch, special education? Look behind the curtain to find out, how specific subgroups are doing. In terms of what I think, Marie, you mentioned just the number of students that are, advancing through to our workforce development opportunities. This new proposed high school graduation diploma and the SEALs will give us a nice data point that we as a community can truly see what percentage of our students are advancing into employment, enrollment, enlistment. And, birth rates are declining. And so when we talk about having people that are adequately prepared to serve us on these Southwest flights, right? We've got to make sure that not only are we paying attention to getting those that we have prepared, but we're paying attention to the number of students that are even coming into our schools. If birth rates are declining, the students that we have are not getting access to a variety of opportunities, inevitably it's going to hurt us globally.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kelly, for sharing. And we're coming up on just like the last 15 or so minutes of our call. So before we open up for Q&A, I want to just ask each panelist one final question. If you could just take a minute or two to be, we're gonna transition to like solutions oriented here. So just take a minute or two. We have a lot of community-based organizations on the call, a lot of nonprofits. How can these nonprofits and community organizations better coordinate their efforts to help, support students and partner with organizations and come up with innovative approaches to, help improve these educational disparities that we see in Indianapolis and Central Indiana? Marie, I'll begin with you, and then we'll round it out before we open up for Q&A.
I believe collaboration is key. And the thing is, one thing is partnerships have to work both ways. So if you want a strong partnership, you have to be willing to provide also the resources as well. So I would say in that, reach out to Employ Indy, reach out to the Mind Trust, and reach out to Indy Reads and see what is needed for the that you can provide as an organization to us as well, just to say, hey, Marie, what do you need to bring out more knowledge about apprenticeships? And you can host maybe an info night for our parents to share about what that is. Or if you have employer partners that you think that would be great for us to work with, that work with your students in your various different programmings that we can work with as well. So just share the knowledge and just be willing to partner on both sides.
Absolutely. And then Darcy, would love to hear your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more, Marie. I think collaboration is absolutely, holds the keys for solutions in multiple directions. One of the things that we love to do at Indy Reads is collaborate with our partners in terms of other organizations that offer services, to the community that we're also seeking to serve. I think, cross referrals to get people resources that they need at the right time. For example, we talked about, the brain and its need for nourishment, right, Kelly? That, so if we recognize there's a barrier in our students, we want to connect them with other organizations. None of us needs to do it all or on our own, right? We are definitely more impactful when we allow each other to operate within our area of expertise, and we continue to have those connections. A big part of that connection is conversations, making time to have those conversations and ask each other, where are we with this? What are you doing well? What are you struggling with? How can we help each other? And then I want to bring it back to, I think the other direction, maybe two other directions, is again partnership with employers. And so yes, can we create something to help a particular construction company, an electric company? Can we help a school develop a program that helps to serve a gap that they have by supporting parents of students, by making sure that employees are able to understand English and have the literacy skills they need to do better on the job? And, in this way, our impact is bigger than maybe, I don't want to say than we hope for, but then, there's this trickle out effect. I was thinking about a conversation we had with a potential employer the other day, and he just, in that conversation, kind of being up close to us and the way we talk about language and literacy at Indy Reads, he had a bunch of aha moments, and he walked away from that conversation eager to partner with us, but eager to go ahead and try some things on his own to implement in that environment. So you're right, Deja. This is about education, educating each other. And I think the third thing I would add here is truly collaboration with the folks, with the community that you're serving. Student-centeredness is just a primary value for us. And I'm realizing more and more every day how much I have to learn about what people want, what they need. They can see it best. We don't need to try to figure out what would be best for them. We just need to ask. And I say that from the privilege of working with primarily adult learners at this point. But I think that's an important theme for us all to keep in mind. It's definitely something that I am eager to learn more how to do and how to do better. So thanks for the question. It's a good question.
Yeah, absolutely. Devin, would love to hear from you, just your perspective on this.
Yeah, I think in complete transparency, I think that yes, communication, collaboration, but I think it's also understanding our current laws, right? Our current ventures and things like that from the DOE. I think that where we've potentially missed the mark is in having these grandiose ideas and great ideas, but then not recognizing that, yes, we want our kids to be in the workforce and we want to partner with businesses, but have we done the research to say, do businesses have the capacity at this point to serve all these students and to have these types of programs? So I think when we consider partnering with organizations and things like that, it has to be overall a learning experience for everyone, right? Asking the right questions, but also coming to the table with some answers too. Like, can you pinpoint? Do you have, your bullet points of what you can provide versus what a student or an organization may need, right? So I think there is some gray areas there that really need to be cleared up, between the DOE, between schools and organizations and businesses, and what we can all provide realistically, and what the scope and the sequence of that looks like.
Absolutely, an evidence-based approach. I love that. And then Kelly, I would love for you to round us out here. And after this, we'll transition to Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Use the Q&A function. Come off mute. But Kelly, just any innovative approaches to better coordinate the efforts to addressing and improving educational equity.
So our panelists have pretty much hit them all, right? You definitely want to stay educated and informed, and really know your target audience. But I think in additionally, looking internally at your organization's strengths and then weighing in that particular area and becoming an advocate. I think a lot of us, we are, connected, or we know of organizations that are extremely strong in particular areas that could benefit our students. And so if each of those organizations, with the educating and the consistent collaboration and partnering, leaned into what is it that they do extremely well, and then leveraging their voice to advocate in that area in support of education equity. I think that's how I would round this out.
Well, thank you all for sharing just some really powerful insights today and some, really diverse perspectives. And we appreciate you bringing all of those to the table. I want to open the call up for Q&A now. If you have any questions about the work, the organization, just innovative strategies, please feel free to come off mute if you're comfortable. But if you prefer dropping your question in the chat, feel free to do so as well. But definitely want to allow some space for engagement with that.
I would love to ask a question if I could. This is Liz Coit from Marion County Commission on Youth. If I haven't met you, I will look forward to it. So McCoy organizes the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council, which includes 28 students from 24 high schools across the city. The first day we bring that cohort together, which we did this year in August at the Peace Learning Center, we spend an afternoon with the students facilitating a discussion about what concerns rise to the top for them. And every year it's a little different, although there tends to be some focus. This year I was amazed, actually. The number one issue for this group, which was a very high energy group and still is, was educational disparities, which was fascinating to me because it's a very strategic level for them to be thinking at. And when we asked them to dig down into that, what does that mean to you? What do you see as the root causes? Let me share the list because there's definitely overlap with what you all shared, but I think there's some other things as well. And I'd love to be able to continue to share their conversation as this develops over the course of the year. But their list included, and I know I don't have this in order because I'm doing it from memory, inadequate IEPs for those with disabilities. Curriculum disparities was overwhelming. And remembering that these kids come from public, both charter and non-charter, private, homeschool, right? So that they represent the whole gamut of school settings. Violence and the fact that some of them have to go to school every day in a violent environment and others do not. The food and hunger issue. Racial injustice. This is an extraordinarily, actually, I would say it's actually almost biased towards racial diversity, this group of students. And then immigration. And that was huge. And in fact, one student who is is going to run the world one day, top student in our schools, her mother was deported the day before she showed up for this orientation. So these are issues that they live with every day. And I think they have insights, even though these are our top students. They understand what gun violence means in a way that our mayor did not, for example. Neither did his team until they explained to them what it feels like to be the student in the school where the child is detained because he has a gun in his backpack. And no one understood that that was because he was bullied on his way to school, not because he was going to engage in violence. No one understood that. So anyway, I'd love to be able to continue to share their insights to the extent they could be a voice to any of you. Oh my gosh, this group of students can speak eloquently and willingly like I could not at their age, but it's a pretty powerful, I think, point of access, at least one perspective from a youth group that I would offer to you all.
Can I just say kudos for doing that and for sharing that and for centering those voices, right? I think that's the role I think our role at Indy Reads is just to elevate the voices that have, otherwise been silenced and marginalized. So thank you for doing that. That was brilliant.
Yes, absolutely. And Marie, I saw you came off mute. I'll allow you some space.
I would say, Liz, thank you for that insight. And also, I would love to say we have an apprentice who actually works for McCoy, and she has enjoyed her experience working with you and learning more about how the work that they're doing impacts the city.
We love Natasha, and she actually is working directly with Mayor's Youth Leadership Council, so she's a good access point. Yep.
Thank you so much for sharing, Liz. That, again, evidence-based data that's coming specifically from the source and very student-centered. So really appreciate you sharing that. And if there's any resources that you'd like to provide or any opportunities for collaboration, please just feel free to drop it in the chat or reach out directly, and we can figure out how we can go about that. We had a question put in the Q&A function from Jessamine. She's asking Marie, what type of apprenticeship opportunities are you seeking young people pursuing most frequent, or are you seeing young people pursuing most frequently?
First, thank you for that question. One, I would love to make sure everyone understands our apprenticeships are not the traditional based apprenticeships that everyone always used to hear about, such as trades. We're also in the high industry demands as well. So, but to answer the question, our high interests are coming from the areas of information technology, IT, business, and even healthcare. Those are where our high interest of students, that's the interest that the students are saying that they're interested in going to. So our apprenticeship program is a 3-year professional work-based experience. So they start during their junior year, working in those environments, their senior year, and that post year after high school. So these students are actual employees of these organizations and gaining that professional work experience and industry recognized credentials. And this is also aligned with the high school graduation requirement as meeting that bucket also of graduation requirements also. So information technology, healthcare, and business are our high industry interests that we're receiving from our students.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Marie. IT is just it's in such high demand these days, but yes, absolutely. Want to allow space for any other additional questions. If you'd like to just share some of your insights from the work that you're doing at your community-based organization, or have any questions or are looking to collaborate, as I mentioned before, feel free to come off mute. If not, then feel free to drop it in the chat box or use the Q&A function as well. We have just a few minutes before we close out. Looks like we have a comment in the chat here. Sam mentioned, for organizations specifically serving K through 12 students, how are you capturing qualitative input from parents or guardians and adult family members? Are you using external communities to support learning outside of schools and organizations? I know one of our panelists spoke to this a little bit about taking the qualitative evidence. Darcy, was that you? No. Someone mentioned something about how important qualitative data was.
That was me.
Okay.
And I think I resonate with this question too, in that, like, so at Indy Reads, we serve adult learners. And one of the things that we're really invested in is our 2-gen work, which means we know we're not just serving adult learners, we're serving their families, we're serving their communities, right? So as one person becomes more proficient, more literate, more proficient with language, we know that elevates more than just one person, right? Together we rise. So I think I'm also eager to hear, if you're mostly serving K through 12, we're eager to know what's the other data that you're getting from the families, right? So conversely, you're not just serving a student, right? That student exists in the context of a family and a community. And what else do we know about that environment and who's there and what their needs are? That's information we're also always hungry for at Indy Reads.
Yeah. And Devin, I know you mentioned data is kind of your middle name. Would you like to speak to this a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I came on last year to Rooted Indy, I did feel like the qualitative piece was missing. We started student and family focus groups last year. So we looked at different groups of students. We did this at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year to reach out to, and actually we do staff as well. So staff, family, and student focus groups where we really just try to dig into, their thoughts, feelings, needs, and that's data that we also track. In addition, we have a family leadership council that meets monthly, and that is also a space for us to communicate with families, but also to get feedback on anything that they feel like would help us, positive or just constructive.
Yeah. Good. Thank you for sharing.
Deja, if we have time, to the question regarding how we're using external community partners, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the partnership that started in 2021 with United Way. The Mind Trust and United Way actually supported over what at the time 3,000 students, working with both community-based orgs and schools to offer summer programming. And the results were phenomenal. We saw double-digit gains in grade level proficiency. Since then, that Indy Summer Learning Lab has continued to grow. And this year, we are super excited that we were able to partner with 52 organizations. 36 of them were community-based orgs. And served over 5,300 kids in just summer programming, grades 1 through 9. The outcomes continue to be positive, and that attracted the appetite for other community-based orgs in 4 other regions across Indiana, and they, were able to offer at least 3,000 students an opportunity. So there's power in collaboration. There's also power in bridging our community with our schools. So I just wanted to definitely acknowledge that.
Thank you, Kelly, for sharing. There is power in collaboration. And one of the things that United Way prides itself on is being a partner in purpose. And it's because of collaboration opportunities like this. We as a community do not make the impact that we need to on the youth and the students that we're serving if we do not collaborate and take advantage of opportunities to engage with one another so that we can be as effective as possible. So thank you so much for sharing that. And to our panelists, I want to thank you all for being here. As I mentioned, I know the weather isn't ideal and it's early Friday